Operation Revenge, the 1978 attack on Katima Mulilo. The year was 1978. Southern Africa was engulfed in one of the continent's longest and most complex liberation struggles. Namibia, then known as Southwest Africa, remained under South African administration despite growing international pressure for independence. Across the border in Angola, fighters of the Southwest Africa People's Organization, SWAPO, continued their armed campaign to end South African rule. Every week brought new patrols, ambushes, and military operations. The conflict had transformed northern Namibia into a battlefield where soldiers, guerrillas, and civilians all lived under the shadow of war. The Caprivi Strip, today known as the Zambezi region, held tremendous strategic importance. Sitting between Angola, Zambia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, it served as a crucial military corridor. The South African Defense Force, or SADF, established Sector 70 headquarters in Katima Mulilo to coordinate operations, gather intelligence, and secure the region against guerrilla infiltration. But events unfolding hundreds of kilometers away in Angola would soon bring the war directly to Katima Mulilo. The Cassinga Raid. On the morning of the 4th of May 1978, South African forces launched one of the most controversial military operations of the Namibian War of Independence. The target was Cassinga, a settlement in southern Angola used by SWAPO. South Africa described it as a military base housing planned fighters, the armed wing of SWAPO, and many international observers argued that Cassinga was primarily a refugee camp filled with women, children, and elderly Namibians who had fled the war. At dawn, waves of South African bombers appeared over Cassinga. Bombs exploded across the camp, destroying buildings and sending people scrambling for safety. Shortly afterward, hundreds of paratroopers descended from transport aircraft and landed around the settlement. Heavy fighting erupted as planned fighters attempted to defend the camp while civilians searched desperately for shelter. By the end of the operation, the camp lay devastated. According to accounts presented by SWAPO and later displayed in Namibian historical exhibitions, 737 people were buried in 2 mass graves following the attack. South Africa disputed aspects of these figures and maintained that many of those killed were combatants, but the tragedy became one of the defining moments of Namibia's liberation struggle. Across SWAPO's leadership, the emotions were intense: shock, grief, anger. The organization vowed that the attack would not go unanswered. Plans quietly began for a retaliation that would demonstrate SWAPO's ability to strike South African military installations inside Namibia. The operation would eventually become known as Operation Revenge. Planning the counterattack in the months following Cassinga, SWAPO commanders studied possible military targets. The objective was not random violence. They wanted to strike an installation that symbolized South African military authority while avoiding civilian areas. Attention turned toward Sector 70 headquarters in Katima Mulilo. The base coordinated military patrols throughout the Caprivi Strip and served as one of the most important SADF positions in northeastern Namibia. Reconnaissance teams gathered intelligence. They observed guard routines, measured distances, studied firing angles, identified suitable launch sites hidden within thick bush several kilometers from the military compound. Instead of launching a direct assault, which would have exposed fighters to overwhelming South African firepower, the planners chose a different tactic, a coordinated rocket strike. The attack would rely on speed, surprise, and careful timing. Once the rockets were fired, the launch crews would immediately abandon their positions and disappear into the surrounding wilderness before South African forces could respond. Weeks of preparation led to one specific night, the 23rd of August 1978, the night of Operation Revenge. Katima Mulilo was quiet. It was shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning. Inside the military base, many soldiers were asleep. Others were on routine night duty. Searchlights swept across sections of the compound, while generators hummed softly through the darkness. Then, at approximately 1:15 a.m., the silence was shattered. From concealed positions beyond the base, rockets streaked through the night sky. Within seconds, they slammed into Sector 70 headquarters. A direct hit struck one of the soldiers' dormitories. The explosion ripped through the building. Concrete collapsed. Windows shattered. Roofs were torn apart. The blast threw sleeping soldiers from their beds. Smoke, dust, and debris filled the air. Panic spread throughout the compound. Survivors rushed outside searching for wounded comrades. Emergency medics raced toward the damaged barracks, while officers attempted to determine whether additional attacks were coming. The attack lasted only moments, but its impact was devastating. The strike killed 10 South African soldiers and wounded 10 others. It became the largest single loss of South African military personnel in one incident during the Namibian liberation struggle up to that time. For SWAPO, the attack represented a carefully planned act of retaliation following Cassinga. For the South African military, it demonstrated that even heavily defended bases were vulnerable to long-range guerrilla tactics. The aftermath as daylight arrived over Katima Mulilo. The scale of the destruction became clear. Damaged buildings stood surrounded by twisted metal, broken timber, shattered concrete, and scattered personal belongings. Military investigators examined the blast site. Engineers documented the impact. Intelligence officers immediately began searching for clues about where the rockets had originated. According to reports, South African forces used experimental listening devices that had recorded the sounds of the rocket launches. By analyzing these recordings, investigators were able to estimate the positions from which the rockets had been fired. Search operations followed throughout the surrounding bush. Meanwhile, newspapers reported the tragedy. The Windhoek Observer described the destruction inside the barracks, noting that young South African soldiers, many between 18 and 20 years old, had become the latest casualties in what it described as South Africa's low-intensity bush war. Families mourned sons who would never return home. Across Namibia and Angola, many SWAPO supporters viewed the attack as justice for Cassinga. Others saw only another chapter in an increasingly destructive conflict, where every act of violence produced another cycle of retaliation. Legacy today. Operation Revenge remains one of the most significant military events to occur in Katima Mulilo during the Namibian War of Independence. The attack illustrated how the conflict had evolved. Instead of conventional battles, both sides increasingly relied on intelligence, mobility, surprise, and technology. The events of Cassinga and Operation Revenge also revealed the human cost of war. Behind every military operation were ordinary people, young soldiers, liberation fighters, refugees, families, and civilians whose lives were permanently changed. Namibia eventually achieved independence on the 21st of March 1990, bringing decades of conflict to an end. Today, the story of the 1978 attack on Katima Mulilo is preserved in museums and historical exhibitions, reminding visitors of a time when the Zambezi region stood on the front line of the struggle for freedom. Whether remembered as a military operation, an act of retaliation, or a tragic consequence of war, Operation Revenge remains an important chapter in Namibia's history, one that continues to encourage reflection on the price of conflict and the enduring value of peace.